let's jump right into a truly fascinating snapshot of a nation in mid-stride. The month is May 2026, and it stands as a pivotal moment where India's highly aggressive global technological ambitions are crashing right into some absolutely profound domestic political and economic shifts. I mean, on one hand, we're talking about massive leaps in space exploration and multi-billion-dollar semiconductor deals. But on the other hand, we're seeing intense regional elections and structural constitutional changes that are literally redrawing the map. We are going to unpack this incredible duality in today's explainer. Here is our roadmap for today. First, India's tech and space leap. Second, global economic headwinds. Third, the 2026 regional elections. And finally, redrawing the political map. Section 1. Outward and Upward, India's Tech and Space Leap. To really understand the scale of what is happening right now, you have to look at the massive shift taking place in India's industrial identity. For years, India has been fundamentally a technology consumer, right? Deeply reliant on imported silicon to power everything from smartphones to electric vehicles. But that is fundamentally changing as we speak. Tata Electronics and the Dutch tech giant ASML just inked an $11 billion agreement to build a semiconductor fabrication facility in Dhalera, Gujarat. To put that into perspective, that is roughly the GDP of an entire small island nation poured into just one facility. This isn't just a factory. It's a highly calculated geopolitical leap to transition India from a consumer into a high-tech manufacturer. Okay, let's get into the technical weeds for a second because the specificity of this deal is what makes it a total game changer. This is going to be India's first commercial 300mm or 12-inch fab. It'll use ASML's advanced deep ultraviolet or DUV lithography. They're specifically targeting mature technology nodes ranging from 28 to 110 nanometers. So why does that actually matter? Because these are the exact nodes that are absolutely critical for global automotive, consumer electronics, and power management supply chains. With commercial production slated to begin in late 2026, this drastically reduces India's long-term reliance on imported chips. But hey, while silicon is completely transforming the ground game, ISRO is transforming the sky. This brings us to Gaganyaan, India's flagship human spaceflight program. This is a monumental endeavor aimed at achieving independent human spaceflight capability. It's a truly historic feat that is going to place India in a highly exclusive club, alongside only the United States, Russia, and China. The timeline for this is incredibly structured, and it's moving fast. By March 2026, ISRO reached G1 readiness, completing over 8,000 rigorous ground and structural tests. That paved the way for the second half of 2026, which sees the G1 uncrewed launch. Now here's a wild detail for you. Instead of humans, this flight carries a female humanoid robot named Vyomitra. And get this, she actually doesn't have legs because, well, she simply doesn't need them in microgravity. She'll be up there testing critical life support and crew module systems. All of this intense validation is leading directly to the ultimate goal, the H1 crewed mission launch targeted for 2027. So what does the actual 2027 mission look like? Here are the exact parameters. A human-rated LVM-3 rocket is going to propel 3 Indian astronauts, officially designated as Gaganyatris, into a 400-kilometer low Earth orbit. They're going to spend about 3 days conducting orbital operations before initiating a controlled re-entry. That whole journey culminates in a parachute-assisted splashdown and recovery by the Indian Navy. It is just a massive, complex validation of the country's technological prowess. Section 2. Macroeconomic realities, navigating global economic headwinds. 6.4%. That is the newly revised 2026 GDP growth forecast from the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Now, to put that number in perspective, this is a distinct step down from the 7.5% growth we saw recorded in 2025. Now, to be clear, 6.4% still keeps India firmly planted as one of the world's fastest-growing major economies. But this downward revision is a stark indicator of some very real external vulnerabilities. So why the drop? Well, we've got a few massive global headwinds dragging that number down. First, the ongoing crisis in West Asia has severely spiked global freight logistics and, crucially for India, energy import costs. Second, we are really starting to see the bite of protectionist trade policies. The 50% U.S. tariffs imposed in August 2025 triggered a staggering 25% contraction in Indian exports to the U.S. And compounding all of this is a new 1% U.S. tax on incoming remittances. Because India is the world's largest recipient of remittances, This isn't just some high-level corporate issue. It's a direct, literal drain on everyday household income and consumer spending for millions of families. Section 3. Internal Restructuring, the 2026 Regional Elections. All right, let's pivot from global economics to the domestic front. Early 2026 saw legislative assembly elections across 5 regional jurisdictions. And the defining characteristic of this electoral cycle was a massive, sweeping anti-incumbency wave. We saw absolutely profound shifts in regional power dynamics, resulting in sudden, decisive government transitions in 3 out of the 4 major states contested. It really highlighted a growing divergence between grand national campaigns and localized, grievance-driven politics. Let's break down exactly how this played out state by state. In West Bengal, a massive BJP victory, driven heavily by public outrage over the RG car tragedy and controversies surrounding the Election Commission's voter roll revisions. Down south in Tamil Nadu, the traditional Dravidian duopoly was completely upended by actor Vijay's new TVK party, and that was fueled by a huge youth turnout. Over in Kerala, the Congress-led UDF actually ousted the incumbent government on localized issues like administrative drift and youth unemployment. Interestingly, though, Assam was the sole outlier here. The BJP managed to buck the anti-incumbency trend, retaining power largely due to highly targeted social welfare schemes for women like Orunodoi. The sheer scale of the upset in West Bengal really cannot be overstated. Out of 293 counted seats in the 294-member assembly, the BJP secured an overwhelming 207 seats. This decisive runaway result ended the 15-year administration of the Trinamool Congress. It was an absolute political earthquake. And this wave of change didn't just sweep away parties, it took down some of the most established political titans in the country. In West Bengal, outgoing Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee actually lost her individual seat in Bhabanipur to Suvendu Adhikari, who was subsequently sworn in as the new chief minister. In Tamil Nadu, DMK leader M.K. Stalin was defeated in his Kolathur seat by a candidate from the newly formed TVK, making actor Vijay's party the single largest in the state overnight. And in Kerala, Congress leader V.D. Sathyasan took the oath as chief minister, replacing Pinarayi Vijayan. Section 4. Redrawing the Map. The Delimitation Bill 2026. Now, for decades, there has been a total constitutional freeze on redrawing interstate legislative constituencies. The Delimitation Bill 2026 completely lifts that freeze. This is not just some dry administrative update, it is a massive constitutional overhaul that profoundly expands and redistributes India's representational federalism across the entire country. We're talking about building a completely new structure for the parliament here. For decades, the lower house, the Lok Sabha, was capped at 543 seats, and that was based on demographic data going all the way back to the 1971 census. The delimitation bill updates this to the 2011 census. Because of the massive population growth during that 40-year gap, the maximum size of the Lok Sabha is going to skyrocket, jumping from 543 seats to a capacity of up to 850 seats. So what happens when you expand the parliament by 50%? You get some severe structural implications. Because the Council of Ministers can be up to 15% of the Lok Sabha, the maximum number of ministers expands from 81 to 122. Furthermore, because the upper house, the Rajya Sabha, remains capped at 250 members, the power ratio between the lower and upper houses shifts from 2.2 to 1 to a highly skewed 3.3 to 1. This significantly centralizes legislative power, giving the executive far greater capacity to override the upper house in joint sessions, all while simultaneously reducing the individual debate time allotted per MP. But honestly, the most fiercely debated aspect of this whole shebang is geographic. A recent stability report warns that states in the southern and western regions, which successfully implemented population control policies over the last few decades, now stand to lose relative representational power. Conversely, northern and central states with higher fertility rates are going to gain a significant share of those new seats. It's a real paradox. High-performing southern states may face representational alienation in the new 850-seat parliament simply because they successfully lowered their fertility rates. This creates a very serious risk of federal friction going forward. Which brings us to the ultimate question facing the nation right now. We're watching a country launch humanoid robots into orbit and build $11 billion semiconductor fabs to compete on the absolute global frontier, while simultaneously navigating historic electoral upsets and a permanent redrawing of its own borders and political power. So, can a nation successfully centralize its political power at home while aggressively decentralizing the global tech supply chain? How India reconciles these two massive forces won't just define its own future, it's likely going to redefine the world order. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and we'll see you next time.